Before smartphones took over, human psychology moved at a different speed. Not better, not worse, just slower. People still felt anxiety. They still felt boredom, loneliness, and fear of missing out. But those emotions lived inside time, not on top of it. Waiting was a normal psychological state. People waited for buses without stimulation. They waited for friends without checking updates. They waited for answers without instant reassurance. In those moments of waiting, the mind had no choice but to wander inward. And that inward wandering shaped an entire generation's relationship with attention, memory, and selfhood. Before smartphones, attention was not constantly fragmented. When people focused on something, they stayed with it longer. A conversation unfolded without interruption. A book demanded sustained presence. A thought could finish itself. This did not mean people were more disciplined. It meant distractions were external and limited, not portable and infinite. The mind learned patience by default. Silence was not a problem to be solved. It was simply part of life. Boredom played a very different psychological role. Today, boredom feels intolerable. It triggers anxiety, restlessness, and the impulse to escape. Before smartphones, boredom was unavoidable. And because it was unavoidable, it became productive. Boredom gave rise to imagination. It allowed ideas to surface slowly. It pushed people toward reflection, creativity, and sometimes meaningful discomfort. The mind learned to generate its own stimulation. Instead of scrolling, people daydreamed. Instead of consuming, they contemplated. Boredom was not an enemy, it was a doorway. Memory also worked differently. Before smartphones, memory was not outsourced. People remembered phone numbers, directions, birthdays, and small details of daily life. Not because they were smarter, but because memory had a function. Remembering was necessary. This strengthened the mind's internal narrative. Life felt more continuous because memory connected moments together. Today, memories are stored externally. Photos replace recollection. Notifications replace recall. The mind remembers less, but processes more noise. Social relationships carried more weight. Before smartphones, social interaction was limited by physical presence. If someone was not there, they were simply absent. This absence created longing, anticipation, and emotional depth. People wrote letters. They waited for replies. They tolerated uncertainty. And through that uncertainty, emotional resilience formed. Today, presence is ambiguous. Someone can be available, but emotionally absent. Connected, but unreachable. Before smartphones, absence was clear. And clarity reduced anxiety. Loneliness existed then, but it felt different. Loneliness was situational, not constant. It arrived in quiet moments, then passed. Today, loneliness often exists alongside constant stimulation, a paradoxical isolation surrounded by noise. Before smartphones, solitude was a space. Today, it is something people try to escape. Yet solitude once served an important psychological role. It helped people meet themselves without distraction. Time itself felt slower, not because clocks moved differently, but because attention was not continuously hijacked. Moments were allowed to stretch. Days had texture. Memories felt thicker. People lived more in sequences than fragments. The mind processed life as a flowing narrative, not as endless interruptions. Emotional regulation worked differently too. Without instant distraction, emotions had to be felt. Sadness was not immediately numbed. Anxiety was not instantly soothed. Frustration had nowhere to hide. This was uncomfortable, but it was formative. Emotions moved through the body instead of being paused, postponed, or buried under content. People learned unconsciously that emotions rise and fall on their own. Before smartphones, identity was less performative. People were not constantly aware of being observed. There was no audience in the pocket. Life happened first, reflection came later. Today, experience is often filtered through the question, how will this look? Before smartphones, that question arrived much later, if at all. Identity formed through lived experience, not continuous comparison. This does not mean life was calmer or happier. People still struggled. They still worried about the future. They still felt insecure. But those struggles existed within limits. The mind was not exposed to thousands of lives, opinions, and expectations every day. Comparison was local. Expectations were narrower. Psychological pressure had boundaries. What changed with smartphones was not human nature. It was the environment of the mind. The brain did not evolve to handle constant stimulation, endless comparison, and perpetual interruption. Before smartphones, the mind rested between moments. Today, it rarely does. Understanding the psychology of life before smartphones is not about nostalgia. It is about remembering what the mind is capable of when given space. Space to wait. Space to feel. Space to think. Some people today still carry traces of that earlier psychology. They are not immune to technology. They simply use it without letting it replace inner life. They can sit without reaching for distraction. They can feel boredom without panic. They can be alone without feeling empty, not because they are stronger, but because they remember a slower rhythm of being human. The question is not whether we should go back. We can't. The question is whether we can relearn what the pre-smartphone mind already knew. That attention is finite, that silence has value, that boredom is not dangerous, and that a life constantly interrupted is a life rarely fully lived.